So I got early access to Durin, and he is quite unique. And I'm not just talking about the fact he doesn't use his own wings to glide. See, the thing is, Durin can be used in so many different team comps, and he's actually really good for them. Not only that, both his white and dark mode are kinda similar, and I assume a lot of people will prefer his white mode. But in reality, after testing them out, I can see why Dark Durin is really strong and fun to use. But there is a catch. Long story short, Durin's situation is complicated, but in this Constellation Zero showcase video, I am gonna reveal to you everything you need to know about this homunculus, which includes over 20 different team comps and loadouts I've tested, so that you can decide for yourself if he's worth pulling for. Okay, so because I'm gonna go through so many teams with Durin later on in the video, for now, he is equipped with Jade Cutter and Noblesse set, but I will sometimes mention if he's using a different loadout, and as for Jade Cutter, it's honestly just a stat stick, and it's easier to use it quickly in many teams, but Finale of the Deep is like almost on the same level, and I'll also showcase it as well. But yeah, other than that, Durin's talents are all raised to level 10, and he's obviously Constellation 0. Oh, and I am on Creator Experience server, so final content is subject to change. Now, let's quickly go through his kit because, frankly, it's quite simple. So, his normal attacks deal physical damage, and they're like whatever. But his charge attack is actually really unique. It's got one of the shortest animations I've seen, especially if you dash cancel it, and it actually will become one of his main moves to unload damage quickly. I want to talk about his dark mode with C6 Bennett a bit later in the video. But moving over to the skill, this is where you get to choose if you want to play either white or dark Durin. After pressing the skill, and if you tap it again, he does this cool jump and plunge attack and enters white mode. But if you instead tap his normal attack, he summons this claw which looks really cool and enters the dark mode. However, the damage he deals with either of them is small. Don't worry, his skill makes up like 3% of total damage output. The rest of it comes from the burst. Anyway, the most important thing about the skill is that whichever mode you enter, he also immediately recovers 33 flat energy at skill level 10 or 30 at level 9. So yeah, this means you will want to max out the skill so Durin doesn't have to build energy recharge. Finally, this brings us to the meat and potatoes of his kit, the burst. So depending on which mode he was in and when you use the skill, he will unleash one of two different bursts. They both will initially deal about the same damage, which will be 3 separate hits after the animation ends, and the damage is yet again pretty weak. But then afterwards, his coordinated attacks and passive effects will be different. Also, one interesting thing to note, even if you didn't use his skill, his burst by default then forces him to enter into white mode, which can actually be useful in some rotations, like this one here, where Durin starts it by first using the burst, then double taps the skill to regain energy, and swaps out with his white mode assisting Venti's team. But yeah, so the first difference between white mode and dark mode when it comes to coordinated attacks would be how the attacks are unleashed. In white mode, the burst attacks have a big AoE, and an attack is released periodically every second, while the ICD is every other hit, so every 2 seconds or so. However, when it comes to dark mode, his attacks become single target. Like, they do have a tiny AoE, as you can see I hit 2 enemies here, but just treat it as single target to be honest. On top of that, these attacks are slower, launched every 1.25 seconds or so, and also has ICD every other hit. Still, if you look at the multipliers, the dark periodic hits have 233%, while white hits have 170% at talent level 10. So yeah, dark mode is preferably best against single target, since it will then deal more damage. Either way, the burst will last for 20 seconds with 18-second cooldown, and as you can see, the cost is 70 energy, but with the skill replenishing up to 33 energy on each use, plus the 4 pyro particles, effectively his burst cost is 37 at skill level 10 or 40 at level 9. Now, this leaves us with the 2 passive effects, which both only trigger when his burst is used. And the first passive basically states that while the white mode burst is active, whenever burning, overload, pyro swirl, pyro crystallize, or cost, or when burning enemies hit with either dendro or pyro, they will lose 20% resistance of pyro and the other element which was reacted with for 6 seconds. This can be refreshed easily, and to put it simply, white mode Durin can shred any element besides cryo and hydro. But why not those 2 elements? Well, that's because when he is in dark mode, he instead will increase his own vape and melt damage by 40%. In other words, dark Durin is best utilized in hydro/cryo or vape melt teams, while other elements that want the resistance shred should be utilizing white Durin. However, that's not all. When Durin is in a team with another Hexerei unit, since he is also Hexerei, his special Witches passive multiplies the values of this first passive by 70%. So that means with 2 Hexerei on team, he will now help shred 35% resistance in white white mode, and his dark mode will improve his vape and melt damage by 70% instead. This is a huge deal because that 70% vape melt increase translates to as if he would have 500 extra EM at least. You can also see here the difference of his vapes. In white mode, he hits for about 89,000 on a good day, but in dark mode, he nearly doubles that by unleashing 158k vape. Lastly, we have the second passive. This one is quite important because after the burst is casted, the next 10 hits will deal higher damage based on his attack. For every 100 attack he has, the damage is literally multiplied by 3%, and it maxes out at 75%, or when Durin has 2,500 attack. This threshold will be very important for him to reach, to the point of that usually Pyro Goblet is fine on him, but if without buffs he cannot reach 2.5k attack, then Attack Goblet actually becomes better for him because these 10 empowered hits for either white or dark mode burst are huge. Also, interestingly enough, even if his white mode with AoE hits multiple enemies, only one stack is consumed, as you can see here. The damage only goes down after 10 hits on a group of enemies. Still, I would say overall, this second passive is a bit more impactful for Dark Durin, since his burst hits have higher multipliers, and usually they will also vape or melt. Okay, so that's his kit. In a nutshell, you use white mode Durin as a support DPS for any team. He can also help shred resistance, but if the team mainly specializes in vape or melt, then you should be using Dark Durin, so he can hit for big damage with vapes or melts. But let me showcase all the teams I've tested so far. Okay, so first things first, I will be showcasing all of the other 7 Hexerei units along with Durin. I won't delve too deep into their kits, just briefly mention what they do now with some stat breakdowns and extra info at the bottom of the screen. Don't worry, I will be releasing shortly after either one big video or multiple videos covering all the Hexerei units in depth. But yeah, let's start with his dark mode teams because they are a bit specific and less varied than compared to his white mode. Now, the first team I really liked was with Farina, C6 Benny, and Mona. Since Mona is a Hexerei unit, she helps power up Durin's first passive, while Mona herself can extend the duration of her Omen debuff on enemy with normal or charge attacks. On top of that, her normal and charge attacks also build stacks, which can then be consumed to increase vaporized damage done by others. Also, in this team, Durin is actually equipped with Hunter's Set, since Farina helps enable it, and with C6 Benny, Durin's normal and charge attacks are infused with Pyro. I just spammed his charge attack with Dash Cancel. It would also sometimes vape as well, so it could hit for around 100k or more damage, plus his Dark Mode burst can easily land around 200k damage. As for Mona, after using her burst, I stay with her and land 4 attacks to extend her Omen's duration and power up Durin's next vape. Plus, she's with Thrilling Tales, which will boost his attack when swapped to him last. But yeah, it's a really fun team. I believe this is his best dark mode comp, but it would definitely be a lot worse without C6 Benny. On top of that, Mona is only C0 here, but her constellations also have been buffed after she becomes a Hexerei member. And long story short, with C4 Mona, you could expect to increase Durin's performance here by around 20 to 30%. I'll talk about this more in Mona's Hexerei video. Now, there's also a budget Durin on-field vape team, or you could call it overvape comp, but with Xingqiu, C6 Benny, and Fischl, it's pretty strong. Not as great as with Mona/Farina, but Fischl is also a Hexerei member. So she now boosts attack by 22.5% when Overload is caused, and EM by 90 when Electrocharge or Lunar Charge is caused. And in this team, you can get both buffs very easily. Not only that, her C6 also got updated, and it doubles the benefits of her Hexerei buff. So in fact, she's providing 45% attack and 180 EM boost, since I enable her C6 here. Just keep in mind, this buff is only applied to Fischl and the on-field unit, not for the whole team. Also, remember how I said initially Durin was equipped with Noblesse Set? Well, usually that's what Benny has, so in that case, you could give Durin like 2-piece Noblesse and 2-piece 18% attack sets. I don't want to delve too deep here, but Durin basically doesn't have a good artifact set right now. Usually just use Noblesse, but if somebody else has it, then you can go for 2-piece sets instead, or maybe even Emblem set. But all in all, the gains are minimal for him either way. I'll talk about this more in his guide on release day. But moving over, Dark Durin could also work quite fine when he's off-field. And this is the team where Mona acts as on-field Hydro driver, and interestingly enough, this team also runs Albedo with Shilonen. Albedo is yet another Hexerei unit, and he basically can now summon Unbreakable Silver Isotoma, so his damage is consistent now and even boosted, while he provides up to 12% damage boost for all units and 30% more for Hexerei units only. So in this team, Durin, Mona, and Albedo would gain 42% damage boost when he has 3000 defense, while Shilonen would only get 12% 12%, but who cares? Her damage doesn't exist anyway. Still, I would say this team in particular is pretty good. Albedo actually contributes a fair bit of damage. We can see him usually hitting for around 64k with the flower, but Mona on the other hand, yeah, her damage is not impressive. It does become much better at C6 and allows her to become a really good on-field driver thanks to new Hexerei changes, but again, more about that in the Hexerei video. I swear, I need to stop saying this over and over. So if Mona is meh as an on-fielder, how about we invite into the party another dragon? That's right, this team of Neuvillette, Mona, and Shilonen is actually pretty fun to use. Dark Durin unleashes strong vapes off-field, and Nuvi does his usual Nuvi stuff. But let me show you this wacky Melt Durin team. So this comp is made up of Citlali, Shilonen, and Sucrose. I start with Durin's skill, normal hit, then burst combo, swap to Shilonen, do her 2 kicks after skill. Then when Sucrose shows up, I use both her skill and burst while the enemy still has Pyro aura on them, then swap to Durin since Sucrose had Thrilling Tails, and when swap cooldown is over, finally swap to Citlali, do her skill and burst, and then just spam Cryo with her normals. As you can see, Durin actually ends up hitting with a 275k melt. That's pretty impressive. Now, yet again, Sucrose is another Hexerei unit I haven't explained to you, but she's quite simple. Now, when her Hexerei passive is enabled, her skill boosts everyone's damage by 5.7%, and then if burst is used, additional 7.1% is provided. And at C6, her burst now provides additional 8.5% damage boost for the element it absorbed. So in Durin's case, after I used Sucrose's skill and burst, he gained around 21% damage boost. Pretty nice in addition to her usual EM and attack boosting from TTDS. Still, I would say this team is a bit unwieldy, and in general, I found much less success with melt variations when compared to vape comps that Dark Durin can excel in. Finally, this Yahoda team with Inefa and Farina is also quite unique for Dark Durin. Basically, with Ascendant Gleam, Yahoda can keep unleashing Hydro attacks from skill and burst, while also providing healing, which helps build Farina's damage percent buff, and then Durin can remain on field afterwards, just dealing physical damage, while his burst can hit for 120k or so vapes. What's also cool, if you keep him on field, you can give him the Sky set to obtain 30% crit rate boost, since the team is in Ascendant Gleam state. It's a pretty unique team. Sadly, without him dealing infused pyro damage like he would with C6 Benny, it is a bit worse, but Inefa does make up for it with her own supportive damage. Other than that, yeah, that's basically it. These are the best team variations I found so far for Dark Durin. Of course, there's many more comps out there, but overall, I would say Vape Durin feels best with C6 Benny and 2 other Hydro options, usually Mona and then either Farina or Yalan or Xingqiu. So this leaves us now with White Mode Durin teams, and boy oh boy, let me tell you, there's tons and tons of them. So let me showcase the best ones I've found so far. And the best way to start would be with good old Overload comps. In fact, in this team of Fischl, Benny, and Chevy, Durin actually stays on field since Benny is C6. And honestly, it's pretty freaking strong. The beloved Homunculus is slightly worse than other Pyro carries here, but he still gets the job done. And man, do I love spamming his charge attack into dash cancel. It's so fast and so satisfying to use. Kudos for Hoyo giving him such a fun charge attack animation, which also is practical with C6 Benny teams. However, what if we actually go for a dedicated Pyro carry like Arlecchino? Well, I tried out several variations of her teams. First one was with Fischl and Benny. Remember, Fischl provides here 45% attack buff for herself and Arlecchino when she's fielded, and it's pretty good. I also decided then later to kick out Benny and put Chevy in his place. This way, no more circle impact gaming, and honestly, it felt about as good as with Benny. But we can also go for Overvape Arlecchino. This way, she and Fischl also gain 180 EM, and with the usual N3 dash cancel combo with Arlecchino, yeah, this one felt best to be honest, at least to me. Definitely faster boss kill time. In fact, you could swap out Arlecchino for any of these teams I've shown with White Durin and use another Pyro carry, and it should be fine. Although, what about the new and improved Klee? Since with Hexerei buffs, her playstyle right now is just to spam her normal 3-hit combo, and she will unleash coordinated charge attacks for free. Plus, her normal string won't even reset, so you can dash to your heart's content to avoid getting hit, and continue with the onslaught of Pyro attacks Klee deals. Also, the Klee I'm showcasing here is C0, but her Hexerei training also improved her C1, C2, C4, and C6, which you can read about here as I yap, but overall, Klee feels really strong with Durin together. Both of them contribute not super big hits, but they happen a lot, especially with Klee. I did see a couple of her coordinated charge attacks landing around 70k damage or so that's pretty good. Who else? Oh my god, that's right, Razor! Man, he actually is so good here. There's a lot of stuff happening with his new kit changes. I don't even want to delve too deep, but long story short, Razor is now like a legit contender for an actually good DPS unit in the year of 2025. This team of Razor, Durin, Benny, and Chevy basically allows him to dish out big damage in smaller but fast hits. As you'll notice, his hardest hitting attack is 70k in Electro or so. But how he works right now is that with Hexerei enabled buffs, his sigils are super easy to obtain, and he can land additional attacks when they overflow, which will happen when using the skill. As you'll notice, I am dash cancelling out of his 4th hit, and after using the skill, he still has that 1.0 jank in him. So without dash cancels, he would be miserable to play and his DPS would nosedive. On a side note, he also badly needs C6 Benny to work, similar to how on-field Durin works. But yeah, let me know guys if you want me to make a full-on Razor guide video. I am not sure if there's a demand. I was a Razor main in the early days, so press like on this video to let me know if you're interested. But let's move away from overload comps and visit the nowadays meta for a minute. I am of course talking about Flint's team. Usually his best comp is him, Innefa, Aino, and Sucrose. Well, with Durin, now Innefa gets replaced by Fischl to enable Hexerei buffing, and overall, I'd say this team is about as good as his premium meta comp, maybe slightly worse, but it's quite impressive overall. And Flint's can dish out usual 300k Lunar Charge hits now with the addition of Fischl and Durin also providing good sub DPS damage. There's also Burgeon Durin with Lauma. I wouldn't recommend running Burgeon Durin without Lauma since she provides so much buffing for bloom comps. But as you'll notice, Durin is actually built here with full EM, while Kokomi with Nivelette act as Hydra appliers. It's good. It's actually really good against multiple enemies, and I've had a ton of fun with this comp. Sadly, none of the buffing from Durin matters here, since he can't shred Hydra resistance for Nuvi, and so the Dragon Boy is literally utilized for his off-field Pyro application. That's it. Now, stepping into Natlan, I want to talk about probably my most favorite team with White Durin, and that is Kinich comp with Albedo and Iansan. Albedo is there to help enable Hexerei. He only gives that small 12% damage buff for Kinich. However, Albedo is also equipped with Deepwood to shred enemies' danger resistance. And man, even at C0, Kinich can fire off 300k cannon shots. That's something that I would expect from C2 Kinich. But with so much buffing he's getting here, resistance shred and noblesse buff from Durin, Iansan Cinder City set plus her attack buffing, and then Albedo giving a small damage boost plus Deepwood set. Yeah, this is now one of my favorite comps. Now, granted, I don't believe I was able to trigger Cinder City for Durin here too, and you could remove Albedo from the team and use Emily instead. This way, even if the team only gets to now shred 20%, Durin could also equip Deepwood while Emily is on her Reverie set, so now she hits hard and Kinich does so as well. Or heck, you could kick out Emily and use Benny instead of her. Now Kinich gets a ton of attack buffs. So yeah, if you get Durin, Kinich mains are gonna be eating good. Now, another Natlan unit that gets to enjoy Durin's company would be Mulani. Although, I'll be honest, in this team with Mona and Sucrose, in reality, the main reason why Mulani is so good is thanks to Mona and Sucrose Hexerei buffs. Durin is mostly there to just provide off-field Pyro application, so that Mulani can vape then. Honestly, I would even consider running Dark Durin here instead of White mode, even if he won't really get to vape unless you go up against groups of enemies. Then you better keep him on White mode so everyone gets Pyro application. Now, another really cool team I enjoyed was Burning Load Clorant with Durin, Fischl, and Dendro unit, this time being Baiju. And it's pretty simple. You use Baiju first, then Fischl, then Durin, and finally use Clorant's burst and spam her skill with normals. This way, while the enemy is burning, the reactions of Overload and Aggravate still get triggered due to how the auras interact from Electro. And honestly, I think from now on, I'm gonna be using Clorant way more often. Sure, her DPS isn't super huge, but her hits can aggravate, and with Durin's and Fischl's off-field damage support, plus comfy healing and shielding coming from Baiju, this team was excellent, and in fact, I gave Clorant Thundering Fury set, which can almost, or I think immediately allows her to reactivate her skill when it's over. Not always useful, but good to have to finish off enemy. Last few comps with less commentary, double Geo team with Navia and Albedo plus Durin and Benny was alright. It didn't wow me, but that's been the case with Geo overall, although I still think this comp was pretty strong and gave me an excuse to run Albedo yet again. Though, if you do want some usual broken power, then Chaska with Durin, Mona, and Benny won't disappoint you, and it did wonders for me, which is what usually you can expect from Chaska comps. Just keep in mind, only her Pyro bullets will deal increased damage from shredding. Hydro won't get shredded by White Durin. Now, I was keeping the last as the best. Well, best in my opinion in terms of wacky fun. There's also Hexerei Venti. If you haven't heard, this guy is now a main DPS, and I even equipped him with the new signature bow. And in this team of Durin, Farzan, and Benny, I didn't think we would see this in our timeline, but Venti's skill now literally can hit for over 100k damage. What is happening right now? Okay, so in a nutshell, with Hexerei enabled, when Venti's burst is deployed, him causing a swirl makes it so that he gains 50% damage boost, and his burst will release an additional 135% damage hit. Not only that, but during the burst, his normal attacks become these Windsunder arrows, which have a pretty big multiplier and can pierce. And he can extend with them burst duration by additional 2 seconds. So yeah, he slaughters groups of enemies now so easily, and with all the buffing he's getting, because remember, Durin shreds 35% of Animo and Pyro when Venti causes a swirl, plus there's Animo shredding coming from Farzan. So yeah, from my experience so far, I think he's up there if not better than Wanderer or Shao. Strong words, I know, although Animo units haven't been top of the meta anyway, and Venti does feel best against groups of enemies. That still stays true. Although even in Stygian's new upcoming rotation, he kicks butt hard. So yeah, it's hilarious to see Venti back from the dead. So what do I think about Durin? Well, I think it's easy to see that this guy is basically going to end up in almost any team. Some will perform as usual, some better, some slightly worse. Overall, I wouldn't say that he is a massive improvement over any team, although few that come to mind that definitely can use him as an upgrade would be Kinich comps, Cloran's Burning Glow team felt great, and of course, Durin's own teams where he's utilized in dark form can be powerful. But as I said at the start of the video, the catch is that he desperately wants C6 Benny, so he can then spam his Pyro-infused charge attacks. Otherwise, you do lose out on a lot of extra DPS if he would be spamming just regular physical damage. So yeah, if you want to play on-field Vape or sometimes Melt Durin, he needs C6 Benito. But as you saw, his dark mode can work off-field pretty well. The only drawback with him right now is that he doesn't have a good or consistent artifact set. Same goes for weapons. Like Finale of the Deep free-to-play option doesn't always trigger its passive even with a healer on a team, and so I found it's best to just give him any of the 5-star stat stick. If you don't have it, well then Lion's Roar or something would be decent too. I also showcased him in quite a few teams with Signature, and overall, I'd say it's not a massive increase to his personal damage, about 14% or so. Like, especially if you play him with Dark Mode, since it provides a lot of team-wide buffing with second Hexerei unit. So I think it's pretty cool how any stat stick or even Wolffang from Battle Pass can compete with it. Otherwise, the potential Durin has is vast, and I really do think the best thing about him is that you can just come up with so many different team comps. I literally had like 40 tested, but to keep the video on the shorter side, including the variations, I only showed about half of them. Maybe we can expand on that in his guide video, but overall, if you like the idea of getting creative with this new unit, and you have a bunch of older Mondstadt units invested into, specifically Fischl, Sucrose, and Mona, there's a lot of ground that you can cover with just these 4 Hexerei unit combinations. But I do believe that most Hexerei units here will benefit a lot from Durin on their team. So on the flip side, if you want to play with buffed Hexerei units, and you want a strong upgrade for their teams, Durin is a no-brainer choice. Anyway, hope you found this video interesting. I'd really appreciate if you could press the like button and subscribe to my channel. And I'm off to work on the Hexerei stuff. Bye bye!